Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a model showcase video for this 1/35th scale M60A2 Starship. Unlike many of the other smaller scale builds which are found on my video listings, in which those builds are built for private commission and belong to a private collector, the model that you see here is built for my own collection and is not for sale and or purchase. However, like I often mention in these build videos, I often take on commission builds from models ranging from 1/35th scale all the way up to 1/6th scale. As for availability and pricing information, that information would be best by contacting me through the email address listed below, which is info@eastcoastarmory.com. The model is built mostly out of the box, however, does feature a few modifications that were made to the model. We'll be going over all these mods and other features in this video. First, let's take a quick walk around the model. This vehicle here is the U.S. Army's M60A2, also known as the Starship. The M60A2 program has its founding in the 1960s and also in the early to mid 1970s. The idea of the M60A2 was to go ahead and have a main battle tank fitted for a main armament rather than a standard traditional rifled gun, that of a guided missile. During the latter portion of the 1950s and into the 1960s, a lot of advancements in technology were being made in aerospace as well as in missiles, namely that of guided missiles. Many of the top military advisors were wondering if the viability of a main gun, a traditional standard rifled main gun, was going to be inadequate and obsolete for the future. And put things in perspective, the future would have been the 1980s and the 1990s. So a program was initiated to go ahead to see if we can go ahead and replace the main gun armament with that of a guided missile. The weapon that came from this development was known as the MGM-51 Shalahi missile. The Shalahi missile was a 152mm guided missile that was used with a laser guidance system. The Shalahi missile system double acted as not only being able to fire a missile, but the weapon was also able to fire a conventional round. The first vehicle that was fielded with the Shalahi missile system was the Sheridan Light Airborne Tank. The tank's performance and capabilities was deemed to be a success by the brass, and the idea was then to go ahead and take the Shalahi missile system and adapt it to a main battle tank role. At this time, the main battle tank in mind that this weapon system was to be used on was the MBT-70. However, that project was still in research and development and would have been a few years before it would have been fielded and ready for production. So a interim tank was needed in order to apply the missile system. At the time, the idea was decided to go ahead and take the current main battle tank that the United States military was using and adopt that for the Shalahi. And that vehicle was, of course, the M60 main battle tank. To upgrade the M60 to the M60A2, the hull was left basically unaltered. However, due to all of the extra equipment required for the turret functions, some equipment was needed to be added to the engine compartment. In order to get everything to fit, the Starship utilized a blister which was modified to the rear lower hull. With the addition of this blister mount, there was deemed to be enough room on the interior of the engine compartment in order to fit the power equipment in order to power the Shalahi's weapon systems. Other than the hull mod that I just mentioned, the M60A2 is very distinctively known due to the very unique shape of the turret. Unlike the other legacy vehicles, the turret of the M60A2 was very different compared to the needle nose turret found on the M60A1 and the round turtleback turret found on the standard M60. The M60A2 turret's configuration was that of a large center high mounted channel, in which that was where the equipment for the Shalahi missile would be found, as well as the tank commander's cupola. The other crew positions were found on low-profile hatches, which were found on the sides of the turret. This is a very unique design in that typically on tank turrets, there are only two or sometimes even one hatch for use for enter and exit of the vehicle. One advantage about this system was that it was actually advertised that with this style of design, there is an easy escapable turret. In case the tank were to get hit, the other crew members of the turret can easily bail out. The tank commander himself has a fully rotating cupola. Just like with other American tanks of the period, the cupola also acts as a mini turret, and he has his own fully independent 50 caliber machine gun. Now, unlike the other legacy vehicles of the period, one thing about the M60A2 is that it used its own proprietary turret. And one special feature it had was that the tank commander had the ability to lock onto a target, and with the flick of a switch, he can bypass the gunner, and the entire turret will then rotate to the target that he marked with his periscope. This was a very unique feature of the period, and was one that was very ahead of its time. Other unique capabilities that the vehicle had was that, like I mentioned before, the Shalehi system can fire both anti-tank missiles as well as conventional rifled ammunition. This was done by having the gun barrel being rifled for that of the conventional ammo, and then whenever it came time to fire the missile, the barrel had a groove cut down the center portion in which a locking tab on the missile would lock into this groove and guide the missile out of the barrel when fired. Unfortunately, the vehicle, when it entered production and was actually fielded, proved to actually be a flop. Some of the problems that the vehicle had was that the missile system was full of bugs. First, the ammunition itself was very expensive. The missiles were not really used all that much often for training due to the sheer cost. In addition to that, the missile weapon system also had several quirks, with the fact that when you fire a conventional round, it would jar up the targeting for the missile, and the missile would then not be able to hit its target. There was also some problems with ranging of the missile and the range of the conventional ammo. In addition to that, the missiles themselves, again, like most other first generation technologies, really weren't well developed. By the late 1970s and into the 1980s, the vehicle's problems were becoming insurmountable. The Army decided to drop and terminate the M60A2 program in the early 1980s. Most of the vehicles, which were M60A2s, had their turrets removed, and their hulls were either turned into M60A3 specs, or they were converted to bridge-laying vehicles. Several examples of the M60A2 Starship are around today and can be seen in museums. Before we go ahead and continue with the video, let's go ahead and take a step back to when the model was first started in order to get a good idea on what the base starter kit supplied you with. And here's the model just before the start of the build. For the base starter kit, I'll be utilizing this Dragon plastic M60A2 Starship. This kit here is a relatively new release, and at the time of this video has been out for approximately a few months. The model was purchased from Amazon.com and hasn't been in the shop for very long. The kit itself is Dragon's first foray into the M60 patent series. The other vehicles, which were the M48s, featured a different hull compared to the M60. More just like with the M48s that Dragon has released, this more than likely will be the first of a series of M60 base vehicles, all comprised with using the same hull components. The choice of Dragon to go ahead and make the M60A2 was a very interesting one. The M60A2 was one of those vehicles that has been neglected by the larger scale companies for many decades. If a modeler was to make an M60A2, prior to very recently, the only options that were available on the market was the old vintage kit from Tamiya. The Tamiya kit itself has been re-released several times. However, the original tooling of that model dates back all the way to the 1970s and was never upgraded by Tamiya all throughout its re-released issues. This Dragon kit here is all comprised out of 100% new tooling and is a lot more accurate in terms of finer details as well as dimensional shapes compared to the older Tamiya counterpart. It's also important to note that along with this version of the Starship, there are two other variations of the M60A2 that have been recently released. One by Academy and another one by AFV Club. As for this kit here, starting with the box art, as you can see, the box art is a typical Ronald Volstead illustration. It features an M60A2, which looks probably more like Reforger in West Germany. It's in a wooded scene with another Starship in the background. As for the rest of the graphic design, it's a typical Dragon. Have your usual CAD illustrations, as well as decal variations. On the back, you have some more CAD illustrations of all the features that the kit has, which is standard for contemporary Dragon kits. Cracking open the box takes us to the kit contents. Like all Dragon plastic kits, they are comprised out of a gray plastic media. As you can see, this here is the upper and lower hulls. For anyone that has watched my other M48 build videos, or has even built any of the Dragon M48 series, you will see a lot of the same ideas in terms of the way the hulls have been molded. Just like with the M48s, they feature a similar type of fidelity in terms of fine cast texturing, as well as molded in crisp detailing. Also, like with the M48s, the road wheels break down in the same format, only they are representative that of the aluminum wheels which are found on the M60 series. Moving on takes us to what is most obviously the turret. Just like with the hull, it features nice fine cast texturing on the turret surface, as well as cast numbers, which are found in their appropriate locations. Here we have the commander's cupola, as well as all the other fittings necessary for the A2's turret. Going down, this here is a runner which was lifted from their M48 series. More than likely, probably just the Searchlight will be utilized for this build, as most of these other parts here are really intended for the M48 series. Going down deeper takes us to some more fenders. These fenders here are specifically designed for the M60, as well as the storage bins and other fender mounted detailing. The kit does recycle the rear engine deck from the M48A3 that was released a little while ago, and was also used on the M103 heavy tanks as well. The kit also supplies with some more clear plastic parts, which proved to be a very nice touch in the other builds that I've done. Moving down to the bottom of the box takes us to the tracks. The tracks are the standard patent rubber chevron style. These tracks here are the exact same tracks which were utilized on their M48 series, which was recently completed. And just like on those builds, I highly recommended this kit because of the nice tracks that come with the kit. Moving down to the very bottom, the kit does supply you with some photo etch mesh. The mesh is going to be utilized for the bustle bins, which are found on the sides of the turret. The mesh itself is a very nice touch, and is one less thing that needs to be acquired from an aftermarket supplier. In addition to the mesh, there's also a nice set of decals, which in the past have always been high quality on these Dragon kits. Finally, to the bottom of the box takes us to the instructions. Like with most Dragon kits, the unused areas are all in blue, and this kit will feature several spare parts which will undoubtedly end up in my spare parts bin. Now, as of note, a lot of their instructions do have some small little errors here and there, but again, if any small errors occur, they will be mentioned in the video. All in all, the build looks like to be a very smooth and straightforward piece. Starting with the model's lower hull and suspension, the lower hull on this model is just like that on any other M60 or, for that matter, an M48 derivative, in that bodywork is going to need to be made to the way the upper and lower halves fit together. This is true for every single M60 and M48 family tank. Now, on the Dragon kit, the hull breaks down in about 2 or 3 different pieces. As you can see from the corner photographs below, some bodywork is need to be exhibited in order to go ahead and blend in all of the surfaces to prevent any type of seams which can be unsightly and can actually hurt the look of the model. On the Dragon kit, the parts do fit together very well, and so there's not a whole lot of fitting required in order to get the pieces to fit where they need to be, which does speed up the bodywork time when it comes time to removal of the seams. Now, one important feature that Dragon actually built into this model is that this version of the M60 is missing certain details which are found on the lower hull, namely that a small little grab and shackle points. Namely, if we look here on the lower portion of the back near the final drive, as well on several other portions of the lower hull, you will see that there's small little shackle points that are omitted on this model. This is as per the kit. The kit does want you to first install the pieces in order to snip away the extra U-shackle in order to remove the small gap which is remaining in the plastic, which is meant for the piece to be inserted into. Rather than doing that, I just simply plugged it up with a small little strip of styrene and added bodywork. Either method, either the kit or the method I use, would be suffice for this application. Other than that, the detail on the lower portion here for the suspension is all stock. The stock components are very nicely detailed and assembled very nicely out of the box. Aftermarket rests and wheels, such as the ones from Armor Scale, are not needed for this model. The one modification that I did make was that of the sprockets. Just like I have showcased on several other of these Dragon patent style vehicles, one area that the kit is missing is that of the mud slits, which are found on the drive sprocket. These small little slits are present on just about every of the M60 sprockets, with that of a few exceptions which I've discussed in other videos. The addition of the slits was very easily done with that of a Dremel and a needle file. Once done to both sprockets, it really helps the look of the model compared to leaving it in its stock configuration. As for the track is totally stock. I just used the flexible vinyl track which came with the model. The track was simply painted, weathered, and mounted in place. The track went on very problem-free and was a very simple install. As a quick note for track painting, the M60, like most American tanks, features a mostly rubber track, with that of the 2 pads on the front, which would be rubber, held in place by metal teeth and end connectors. As for the interior portion of the track, you will see that the rubber pads that only extend to each side of the road wheel, and then after that there's a metal skeleton in place for that of the track link itself. This portion here would be metal on the real tank, while the rubber pad, of course, would be rubber. By painting these pieces appropriately is another way to greatly help the look of the model. Moving our way to the back of the model, one portion of where this kit is really nice is that it gives you the detailed blister here, which is found on the lower hull. Due to the equipment required for the Shalakian missile, some other equipment needs to have been mounted inside of the engine compartment. There was not enough space originally with the original M60 design to mount this equipment, so a modification was made to the lower hull to add this large blister that you see here. The blister is supplied with the kit. It is a nice feature, as it is missing on the old school Tamiya kit. In addition to the blister, there's also the other detailing which is required for this blister, which modifies that of the rear engine grills. All of the components that you see here are all stock out of box, and again, assemble very easily, which is a nice touch to the kit. Moving up from the blister takes us quickly to the exhaust. Exhaust soot was added to these two locations here on the rear engine grills, as on the real M60, it is at these 2 points here on which the exhaust manifolds would be mounted and would just jettison out the exhaust from the diesel engine. Moving towards the front of the model takes us to the bow headlights. The bow headlights you see here are a two-piece affair. You have a plastic rear portion, and then you have a clear plastic lens face. It's a very nicely detailed component and one that paints very well and mounts very well. Once the pieces are appropriately painted, they really help the model pop and are a nice addition rather than having just a piece made of opaque plastic, which would either need to be painted or drilled out and epoxy added in place. As for the brush guards are also kit original and are very nicely done and are what one would expect for a modern contemporary kit. As you can see, as a nice little side note of the kit, that the brush guard is actually hollow and replicates that of the hollow channel, which would be found on the real brush guard. Like with all M60s, the front tips of the mud flaps are actually made out of an industrial rubber, and again are painted and weathered appropriately. This is another feature which also helps the look of the build for anyone who's modeling an M60 series vehicle. Moving up from the headlights takes us to the fire extinguisher box. Just like on all of my builds, the two little handles of the fire extinguishers are painted in red, which again helps the look of the model and is a nice simple touch to add to anyone's build. Moving up to the bow periscopes, just like with the headlights themselves, the bow periscopes are made out of the same clear plastic and are again a very nice touch on the kit's behalf. Moving to the driver's hatch. The driver's hatch that you see here is lifted from their M48 series. Now, I believe on these early pattern of M60s, the driver's hatch is adequate for this version of the tank. However, one thing is important to keep of note is that on the real M60, the bow hatch is opened by lifting up and sliding to the side. On this version here, since Dragon went ahead and recycled the hatch from their M48 patent, there's a small little mounting peg in order to mount on the hatch. The M48 hatch opens up differently than the M60, as instead of it sliding, the hatch simply lifts and rotates out of the way. This is incorrect for an M60, and in case if anyone is interested in building this model with the hatch in the open position, that is something to keep aware of, as if you model it with the hatch open as per way the kit has it, you will be incorrect. Now, the kit doesn't advertise that the hatch is designed to be molded in the open position, and it just looks like that the peg is there just for you to mount the hatch on in the way you see it here. Moving from the hatch takes us to the heater exhaust, which is a staple on these M60 series of vehicles. The exhaust was all built out of box. Unlike other versions of the patent in which we've seen some PE utilized for the braces, this here it's all plastic. Very simple construction, very nicely detailed. The hole is already pre-drilled into the tube and was a simple drop-in install. As for the weathering, my simple rust and soot weathering was added, thus completing the look. As for the rest of the tank's upper hull detailing, it's all again built out of box. It all went together very simply and easily and is actually very nicely done. As you can see, Dragon went ahead and made the cross members for the fender supports. They went ahead and molded in the integral holes, which are missing on some of the older legacy kits. However, rather than needing photo etch or as an upgrade, the Dragon just gives it to you out of box, which again is a very nice touch. Now, one mod that needs to be made to the rear engine deck in order for it to be an M60A2 is that if we see here the small divot on the rear engine hatch, which on most M60 and patent vehicles would be that of the mounts for that of the travel lock for the main gun. Because the main gun is so stubby on the A2, the travel lock in the rear was deleted and is not necessary. Now, the kit does have two small molded in pegs which are present on the casting, again as this piece here is lifted from their M48s. The two pegs are not necessary and need to be deleted by the modeler. A quick swipe with a Dremel and some sandpaper, and the piece was totally ready to go. Moving our way to the most important part of this entire model, and that is of the Starship's turret. As you can see, the M60A2 has a very distinctive turret which in itself kind of has a similar resemblance to the modern Striker MGS turret, but that's another story. As for the turret itself, again, it's all built out of box. The Dragon turret is very nicely done in that it has its asymmetrical shape to it, and it does feature some cast texturing on the surface. Now, one area to keep in mind of the Dragon kit is that of this area here, where the front of the trunnion meets the mantlet. On the kit, there is a small, since there's two separate pieces, there will be a seam that the model builder must contend with that runs along this portion here. On my model here, I was able to delete the seam and to blend it into the rest of the turret's casting. As you can see, the model does not have its tarpaulin represented, and the gun can go up and down, albeit as a very limited amount. The rest of the tank's detailing, again, assembles very easy and very effortlessly. One area that Dragon did skimp on this kit is that if we notice here, the kit is missing that of its tow cables. The M60A2 features its tow cables mounted on the side portion of the turret that wrap around and over where the crew hatches are. This is a mirror image on the opposite side. Dragon does not supply you with the hardware to mount the cable, which is interesting as the metal cable was supplied with other Dragon kits of the same period. Also, the Dragon kit does supply you with the small little clips for that of the tow cables. This is one area where Dragon's kit's also a bit lacking. The clips, in my opinion, are a bit too clunky in appearance rather than the small little thin strips which are actually found on the actual tank. In addition to that, the Dragon kit is also missing the final clamp for the tow cable, which is located right under the bustle bin right over here. Again, it's an reversible image on the opposite side. Rather than using the kit parts, I went ahead and fabricated new components out of very thin strip of brass. They were cut, bent to shape, and then simply mounted to the model in their appropriate locations. By adding the clips and foregoing the plastic versions, in my opinion, also is a nice little tip that helps the look of the model. Moving our way to probably the most important portion of the turret is that of the rear bustle bin rack. The M60A2's rack is very distinctive and differs from just about every other tank with a bustle rack system that's out there. The rack that is found on the model here is exquisitely done by Dragon, and everything you see here is built out of box with no mods made. The Dragon kit really did a nice job in having everything broken down into lots of different little pieces, which are assembled in sub-assemblies and then mounted to the model. By doing this, they were able to get a lot of detail into these components in a nice manner. Also, the way the pieces are casted, they are somewhat easy to remove off of the runner in order to do the assembly. However, this is one portion of the build that a lot of caution and a lot of patience needs to be exhibited, as you need to have nice sharp tools in order to remove all the parts correctly, and a lot of patience in order to get everything to lock into place. If you try to rush, or if you're using dull tools with this, you may as well have ruined some of these parts, which will utterly destroy the look of the bin and really hurt the look of the model. Also, a nice touch with the grill work is that the Dragon kit supplies you with photo etch mesh for all of the appropriate locations. This is one portion of this kit that shines compared to its older legacy counterparts. The mesh is all pre-shaped to the correct lengths that the pieces need to be added to. You simply carefully remove them off of the sprue, bend them around a round blunt object, and then go ahead and mount them to their appropriate locations. Painting the mesh is a bit problematic if one is not experienced, and must be done with very thin paint through an airbrush. Otherwise, you can easily plug up these small little meshwork, which will also really degrade the look of the build. Now, one thing I always loved about the Starship is that of the smoke trajectors. As you can see, the smoke trajectors are mounted on the sides of the turret and are different compared to that of your standard US 1970s era AFV smoke trajectors. Rather than a cluster, they are a ovular band that mount on either side. The Dragon kit detailing is nicely done. However, one quick mod I made was that of the firing cable. If we look into the space here between the launcher and the turret, you will see a small little cable that protrudes from the launcher and connects to the inside of the turret. This is done on the opposite side. Again, a nice little quick bit of detailing. That is a simple bit to add and also does help the look. The kit also features the Searchlight storage mounting rack system, and when the Searchlight is not in use in the front, it gets clipped to the back in this location here. If you are clever enough, you can actually mod the kit in order to display the Searchlight in this manner. Moving our way to the tank's antenna. The antenna base that you see here is the stock plastic antenna, and like what was seen in the unboxing, the antenna base and wire are all molded as one piece in plastic. As like I've said in several of my other videos, this style of antenna is a bit problematic and is very frail and easy to break. Rather than using that version, I went ahead and removed the molded in version of the antenna, drilled a small hole into the spring base, and mounted a metal wire. It's another simple addition, but is one that needs to be added with caution, as well as the correct tooling. If you do not possess a Dremel with a small enough bit, do not attempt this procedure, as you might as well ruin the stock antenna base, which is nicely done for, again, the kit supplied media. Moving our way to the tank's commander's copula. The A2 Starship's copula is also different compared to that of your standard M60A1s. The copula itself is designed to rotate. However, unlike many other of my builds in which I design locks to lock the copula in place, on this kit here, that's not possible. The copula is held on purely with friction of the molded in ring and the copula itself. When you paint the model, the extra paint does help in giving a nice sturdy bond, which is, my opinion, is more than enough to keep the component in place. The funny thing is that this is almost identical to the old school Tamiya kits that came out in the 70s for the same reasons. The piece can be glued in place, but as you see, I like to leave it loose in order so I can mount the commander's copula in any way I want for display purposes. Now, one modification I did make to the copula was that of the shell or the spent link ejection chute. As you can see, with a Dremel and with a needle file, I hollowed out this section here. On the kit, this is solid molded as one piece, and on the real vehicle, there is a slit milled into this recess here in order for the spent links and shells to emerge from this portion here. Moving our way to the commander's machine gun. The machine gun that's molded in to the kit is representing that of the M85. The M85 that is present on the kit is very nicely done. It features both the vents on the cooling shroud as well as the M85's very distinctive muzzle brake, which not only has its slit detailing, but its bore end and muzzle end is also pre-drilled. Now, it's an important side note that the M60 series is the only American-made battle tank series that did not utilize the M2HB. Rather than the M2HB, the M85 machine gun was developed and utilized only for the US to go back to the M2HB, as the M85 was very problematic. This is important to note in case anyone is building one of these kits and decides to swap out the plastic barrel and have the urge to replace it with a metal barrel. If you use the standard metal M2HB barrels that are found on the aftermarket scene, the model will be very inaccurate. Moving away from the copula takes us to the Searchlight. The Searchlight that you see here is the exact same Searchlight which is found on all of the Dragon M48 and M103 series models. The Searchlight is also a very nicely done piece. It comprises out of several different components that, once glued together, really represent a nice detailed version of the Xenon Searchlight. The piece also has a molded clear plastic lens with rivet detailing, and just like with the other Searchlight that I did on my other model, the Searchlight we notice is a different color than the rest of the model, as these Searchlights again were interchangeable and oftentimes the colors did not match that of the vehicle. Also, as you can see, the Searchlight does have its distinctive red gasket, which is found on the interior portion of the lens, and is a simple addition to make, and one that also really helps make the model pop. Just like with the other M103 I did with the Searchlight, one component that is not supplied with the kit that really is necessary for mounting the Searchlight is that of the actual power cable. The power cable that we see here is actually a piece of electrical wire that I went ahead and added 2 pieces of shrink tubing to the ends in order to form the fittings. With the addition of the cable, it really helps the look of the model compared to leaving it without the component, which in my opinion is very naked. I also recommend this kit to anyone who is an avid fan of Cold War military vehicles, as well as the Patton family tree aficionados, as the M60A2 Starship was a very important footnote in the Patton's lineage. And no Patton collection is complete without at least one M60A2. As for paint and markings, the model that you see here is painted for a 1970s era Merc pattern. Like I've done in several other Merc painted vehicles, in the 1970s, the United States military adopted a uniformed pattern of colors and palettes in order to paint their vehicles. As for the actual Merc pattern itself, there are several versions of this type of pattern. This version here, I believe, is called the Winter Verdant. A really good reference in order to paint these camouflage patterns is at the following link below. There you will see not only the color palettes to be used for the Merc pattern, but as well as the actual official Army paint by number guide system for each of the vehicles. As you see, this here is for the M60A1 hull, the front and the back, as well as they even have the rendition and the instruction sheet for the Starship's turret. This source here is highly recommended for anyone building a Merc era vehicle. As for difficulty and skill range recommendation, the model itself, in my opinion, is just a little bit more harder to build than that of the Tamiya versions and the Academy M60A1 kits that have been on the market. The only caveat, of course, is that of the Bustle bin and that of the photo etch. Because of the complexity of these 2 components here, I really can't recommend this kit to a beginner model builder. This kit here is really more or less designed for someone from an intermediate range and up. A good person to recommend this kit to is definitely someone who has built both the Tamiya and Academy M48s and M60A1s and is really looking for something to the next level. For that type of person, this kit here is definitely recommended. This kit here I definitely recommend to anyone who is a fan of Cold War era military vehicles, as well as people who are fans of odd prototype and limited adaptation military vehicles as well. And then of course this kit is definitely recommended for anyone who is an avid fan of the Patton family tree, as no Patton family tree lineage is complete without at least one M60A2 Starship. Like I said in the unboxing portion of the video, this was one release that when it was announced I was actually very excited for, as the M60A2 Starship is actually one of those vehicles that I always did have an admiration for. The vehicle is a very unique specimen and is one that has been for the longest time neglected on the scene, with the only kit that was around was the old Tamiya kit, again dating from the 70s. Now, in addition, like I said before, to this kit here, there are 2 other versions of the Starship kit that have been released, all 3 of which are new tooling. You have the Dragon kit here, as well as a upgraded kit from Academy, and a brand new tooling kit from AFV Club. Each one of those kits are good for a certain application, of which hopefully I'll go into in a future video. And that concludes this model showcase video for this 1/35th scale M60A2 Starship. If you like this video, stop by and like us on Facebook, and don't forget to check out eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks for watching.